Maria and Bill have said that it's very weird to call him by his first name. Maria and Bill have said that they would like to.
Why that. You need to say why that's weird.
This is my father. My father actually asks for nothing ever, and this is the one thing he said. Can you make this happen? And we can do things. As a bookseller, there's very
took
little.
A year, but.
That's right. There's very little I can offer anyone in my life except an event. But we're going to do something that's going to be, since we've got a nice cozy group, something that's interactive. We won't do the classic long talk and then you guys get to join, but I'm going to let them get to it. First though, some intros. Bill Ong Hing is a professor of law and migration studies at the University of San Francisco and professor of law and Asian American studies emeritus at UC Davis. He founded the Immigrant Legal Resource Center in San Francisco in 1979. This, Humanizing Immigration, is his 7th book. And Maria Hinojosa, who has a list of accomplishments that we just would be here all night if we had to talk about, is the Pulitzer Prize winning founder of Futuro Media, based in New York City. She's written 4 books, of which her most recent is a young reader's version of her memoir here, Once I Was You. She's won multiple awards and is the anchor and executive producer of the Peabody Award-winning show Latino USA. And these days, her focus is deep accountability investigative journalism. And the floor is yours.
Bill?
Hola Maria, ¿qué tal?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. Bill and I decided that we'd love to, at any point when you have a question, just raise your hand, and we'd love to incorporate your questions into our conversation. And Bill and I Bill serves on the board of directors of Futuro Media, so thank you, Bill, because Bill is always giving back. It's really my honor when he said, would you do a book event with me? And I was like, absolutely. And basically, Bill and I are going to use this opportunity to get to know each other better, because we're often in places where there are other people here. Okay, we're going to pretend like there aren't any other people, and we're just going to have a conversation about getting to know each other and the reasons why we do the work that we do. So,
I've told you this, but I don't know if you remember. The first time I met you was during Prop 187 in California, and
do I remember this?
And you came to. So this is the early '90s, right when Prop 187 was happening. And I was on the faculty at Stanford, and wow, Maria Hinojosa wanted to interview me. And so you came to campus, to my office, and we talked about the ills of Prop 187. That's the first time we met.
I love that. My mom, at that point, was not a U.S. citizen, and because of Governor Pete Wilson, she decided, and my sister decided to become American citizens because of Prop 187, and they were living in Chicago at the time. By that time, I was already a citizen. It was a big deal in our family to make that choice to leave your Mexican citizenship behind. So thank you, Pete Wilson, for nothing else but that.
Well, Prop 187 played a big role in the transformation of California politics, right? It inspired many young Latinx activists in the community who eventually became elected officials, and I'm hoping that transformation, I don't believe today that Prop 187 would ever pass in California. I'm hoping that transformation presages what happens in other parts of the country. What do you think?
Oh my God, please, yes. In other words, the defeat of Prop 187 and the resulting change in the status of California, which was a red state. And by the way, I need to make it clear, people, so Twitter, X, okay. So people on Twitter believe that I am a Trump supporter.
Are you serious?
No.
Because I criticize the Democratic Party so much. Mm-hmm. And people on Instagram believe that I'm a rabid revolutionary communist. So because I bash Trump so much, so that's kind of interesting. But I don't, the party politics of it is very exasperating, my role as a journalist is to push both and all sides. But my gosh, if the country could go the way of California, and when I say that, it's because California is really cool. Like as a state, like the vibe in California. It's not cool. But we love it anyway. You know, we absolutely love it, and for what it represents. So yeah, Bill.
Why don't you guys say something about what 187 was? Because it feels like
You know what,
so
yeah.
prophetic of
So this
what
is-
happened.
Thank you for
one
saying
of my
that.
many intellectual friends, Professor Mary Pratt, who we were colleagues at Stanford,
Stanford.
and then she and her partner Renato Rosaldic moved here to NYU, and you don't think people in the audience know Prop
Oh, I
187?
think a
huh,
lot
Mary?
of people don't know Prop
So-
187 yet.
Before, well, you don't even know these things either, but before Arizona's SB 1070, anti-immigration stuff in Arizona, before Texas's current SB 4, which is also one of Abbott's anti-immigrant things, Prop 187 launched Governor Pete Wilson into national notoriety because he believed that in order to win re-election, does it sound familiar, that he could do that by bashing immigrants in California. And so Prop 187 would preclude undocumented children from attending public schools, and it would preclude lawful immigrants from most public benefits in California. And it passed pretty overwhelmingly.
And there was Latino support for it.
There was Latino support for it, just as there's Latino support, which we'll get to in a minute, I hope, for Trump in states like Texas and Arizona. But at any rate, it was immediately challenged in court, and fortunately, the courts stopped 187 from going into effect. And what often is not reported actually is that there was never actually a clear court victory actually striking down 187. There actually was a negotiation because the next governor of California had the Attorney General not push 187 further beyond the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals actually. And so it actually never saw the light of, Prop 187 actually never saw the light of day again because of a negotiation.
It was a marker, and sadly, it really changed a lot in terms of the national tenor of what could or could not happen in our country. 9/11 happens. I mean, we're a stone's throw actually from 9/11, and that, in many ways, Bill. I mean, we could see it, right? The immediate turn that was going to take in terms of anti-immigrant. Sounds familiar? First targeting Muslim folks, very specifically. And then it's like anybody who is an immigrant is subject, right? And that leads to, and it's so heartbreaking, Bill, and we've never actually spoken about this, but I developed PTSD when I was covering this story, spent a lot of time with death and dead, but what happened at that moment is the unleashing of the then apprehension in a massive way of immigrants, and therefore the building up of detention facilities, right? And the beginning of really the militarization of the border. And when I talk about militarization, we were talking with a colleague who was saying, well, it's not actually the military who are there. In Mexico, it is the military who are now on the borders. And I was like, well, but there are military on the borders in different moments, right? The National Guard is called in, et cetera, et cetera. But the militarization that you see now, and it is horrific, is just barbed wire everywhere, the Border Patrol, et cetera, carrying big, tall weapons, some in full riot gear. The sensation that things are completely out of control, and it's like, in my view, Bill, it's out of control because you all don't know how to do your jobs. You absolutely, like, if it was privately run, and I'm not suggesting that at all, ever, of course, but the point is that they absolutely don't know how to do their jobs. And what I mean by that is the flow of humanity is going to continue. I mean, you and I are part of that historically, right? So you can't just be like, we're just going to build a wall and that's going to solve everything. It's like, how do you understand this? How do we understand that immigrants and refugees are going to come no matter what, because they're not consuming the headlines about what's happening in U.S. domestic politics? They're concerned with, my crop just failed, or I was raped and beaten just one too many times, and now's when I'm going to go. And that's when I say, what a failure. You absolutely have no concept. And, you know, a pox on the Democrats and on the Republicans for not dealing with it and making it better, but in fact making it worse consistently.
Yeah, let me unpack and react to several of the things that you raised, Maria. First of all, thank you for your post 9/11 coverage, not just about the anti-Arab Muslim crap that happened after that. And I've often said that George Bush blew it, because there was actually a great moment within a few days of 9/11 when he was on stage with a very diverse group of folks, and of all different stripes, but many South Asians and Muslims saying, these are not our enemies. And the world was with us at that point, and then he blew it with his actions after that. And also thank you for covering those who were silenced during 9/11, the victims who were migrants from all over the world, including Latin America. But I want to take one step backwards to something that you write about in your book, and I've written about in other areas, and it was the week before 9/11 when Vicente Fox was in the White House with the other boot-wearing president, George Bush, right? They were amigos. They loved riding horses. And there was a promise that Bush made that by the end of the year,
Oh my God.
comprehensive immigration reform would be passed, and that there would be legalization for whatever the estimate was at that time of undocumented immigrants.
And I remember saying,
9/11 just pulled the rug out from all that.
I remember saying, if George Bush is able to deliver this is going to cement Latino support for the Republican Party in a way that we cannot imagine. The opposite happened, and now you have Latino support for the Republican Party in ways that we cannot imagine.
Yeah, and that's funny. Let me tell you a story. I was invited after Barack Obama. This is with respect to the Republicans cementing their place in history as being pro-immigrant. After Barack Obama won re-election in 2012, I was invited to New Orleans to James Carville's house. He actually pulled together a group of immigrant rights activists to meet with Republican and Democratic strategists on passing comprehensive immigration reform. And the premise for that meeting actually was that the Republicans were worried after Barack Obama won re-election. They were worried that they would never win the White House again if they did not do something to help pass comprehensive immigration reform. So we worked with them for 3 days, and indeed they introduced legislation the first part of January after Obama's term started, and sure enough, within a few months, the Senate passed comprehensive immigration reform in the early spring of 2013. And it was passed on to the House, and John Boehner couldn't get it done. Remember, he tried to break it up into different bills, but there was a reactionary group in the House. But I tell my students this all the time. There's a number of them in the audience now, former students, that Donald Trump screwed that all up because they were worried in 2012, Republicans, that they would never win the White House again unless they helped pass comprehensive immigration reform. They were worried, and Donald Trump proved them wrong. Not only could the Republican Party win the White House again if they didn't do something pro-immigrant, they could win the White House touting an anti-immigrant sentiment, and he's been riding that wave ever since.
So I was on MSNBC a couple of weeks, whatever, and with Jonathan Capehart, and he threw me this question. He goes, "You have 30 seconds to answer this question," and I was like, "Ugh." He said, "So why are Latinos and Latinas voting for Donald Trump?" And I said, I should have said, you know what, I can't take 30 seconds to answer that question, so I'm not even going to try. But I was like, well, they want to be white, and I said, they want to be part of the majority. They want to be part of the cool kids. They want what I wasn't able to get into more profound elements. And of course, this is a long, complicated issue that I was just like, well, they want to be white. And by the way, Breitbart and Fox News took that and they were like, public radio journalist says Latinos just want to be white. Ah! And I actually have a response in an essay that I still haven't finished. I want to. I'll decide whether or not if I want to try to put it out there. But the point is that when you have the continual mis and disinformation about immigrants, right? They're terrible, like now what we're seeing is over the top, the horrific things that are being said about us, right? But if you just let that be delivered over and over and over again, and you understand that there are forces in Spanish language media and social media that are pro-Trump for all kinds of complicated reasons, sometimes just geopolitical, anyway, and you're not countering that constant, immigrants are criminals, they're coming here. I mean, what he's saying, I'm not even going to repeat it because you know what he's saying, these horrific things that you're like, what are you talking about? What country is it? If that's the country we live in, we don't have an immigration problem. We have a crime problem. And as you know, crime has dropped precipitously across the United States over the last 30 years and in the last decade. But when you want to be accepted, right, then the chances of you saying, well, I'm definitely not one of those horrible illegal people who are committing crimes and coming over, the border, that's not me, so I guess Donald Trump is my guy. And what I keep saying, again, to the Democrats is, you missed your opportunity, right, to go in from the very beginning and to just say, okay, you think that there's crime on the border. Okay, fine. We're going to deal with it. But then you immediately turn and say, but we know that overwhelmingly our immigrant population is this, all of the truth, right? And to put an affirmative in front of the voter, which is, but I know this is who you are because that's me, as Kamala Harris. And also just repeating over and over and over again, I'm not going to separate families. I'm going to reunite families. I'm going to go for comprehensive immigration reform. There will be a pathway to citizenship, pathway to citizenship, pathway to citizenship, and repeat it over and over. I would have done a jingle about that. I would have done a merengue, a reggaeton, a salsa, a mariachi. I would have done it in all different forms that said, pathway to citizenship. I'm going to deliver. I believe in you. And instead, so Bill, my concern, and I know that it is not on the backs of black men or Latinos and Latinas that are going to deliver Donald Trump. I mean, it is white folks, and they need to take responsibility for that. But I did, my analysis in terms of the numbers was Latinos are the swing within the swing, and they can't deliver this for Kamala Harris. And my concern is that I think that they may end up delivering it for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, that's scary, and I know you've done recent work in Arizona, and it's so frightening to me. I told you right before it, because I'm from Arizona, and I know many Latinx politicians there. One of my best friends in high school is influential in Arizona politics who's Latina, and a former migration studies student from USF is in the state legislature. I just, a couple of reactions to, on the crime thing, and some of you I know watched Kamala Harris being interviewed last night on Fox, and she had an opportunity to remind folks that the crime rate among migrants is way lower than the average crime rate for the rest of the country. And believe it or not, that's the truth, the crime rate among undocumented migrants is even lower still. And so, listen, she had it right. She did feel very sorry for the victims of those families, but just because somebody is a victim of someone who happens to be undocumented, you could pick any demographic cohort and find somebody who committed murder in that cohort, and it's an awful thing to say, but we've allowed certain people to control the narrative on the border, and we've both been to the border, and I always say this to people who challenge me: come with me to the border, come with me to the border, and interview the folks that we are interviewing and counseling when my clinic students and I go, and you'll change your mind. Those folks are not there for a picnic. They are fleeing for a good reason, and they're suffering while they have been forced to wait under every administration in the past, and it's time that we start treating people like human beings and giving them the dignity that they deserve. We both happen to write about our experiences in interviewing children in detention, and I'm not exaggerating. I actually think about a particular experience that I had a year after Trump separating parents from their children. I was at a detention facility of the Border Patrol, which is unusual because usually they're held by non-Border Patrol. And we interviewed over 200 children that were not supposed to be there for more than 72 hours, and most of them there for 3 weeks. And they were crying, they were malnourished, they were sick. It was before the pandemic, but there was a flu going around. And I still think about those kids, and I kept their phone numbers and checked up on every one that I had interviewed to make sure that they were okay and that they met the adults that they were headed to. We ended up representing one of them who ended up living in Marin County, and the fact that our nation condones to this day the detention of children is something that we really must be ashamed of.
So, not to plug, but actually a little plug. So, Futuro Media right now, the most recent podcast that we dropped is called The Chess Piece, which is about the Elian Gonzalez story. Obviously, most people here also don't know about the Elian Gonzalez story, but a child that was brought from Cuba who ends up alone, rescued in the middle of the ocean and then taken to Florida. And the whole debate is, should the child remain in the United States with his cousins and uncle, or should he be sent back to Cuba with his father, who's a communist? And so it was just like, capitalism or communism, Fidel or Clinton, actually. And what ends up happening is actually the child is forcibly taken from his family members and taken back to Cuba. And that's like, and everybody was like, oh my God, this is horrible. And it's like, yeah, but his father wants the child back. That was the United States that would take a child and return him to his parents. And we have become the country that is actively separating and children from their family members. And in our podcast, you really get into like the deep emotional scars of what child separation looks like. And I know you're going to know when I say this, Bill, because I know you've had the same experience. And so So I'm a proud Mexican, which means I have 16 different jobs, and one of my jobs is that I'm a professor at my alma mater at Barnard College at Columbia University. And I end up having students who were separated from their families, you know, who end up coming, and in the classes that we take, they suddenly are like, oh, that's what I was doing when my mom was taken for a year. That's what I was doing when I was staying with my aunt, and we would go visit my mom someplace. All she remembers is that they would get ice cream after every visit. So in her mind, the visits to mom, who was being held someplace, it wasn't that she understood she's being held by immigration officials for a year because they want to deport her, and you know, no, she was like, I'm just going to visit my mom and I get ice cream. And then in college, right, has this realization. So I know, like the child that I write about in the introduction of Once I Was You. So Once I Was You came out in 2020, and I write that introduction, I guess, in the beginning of 2020. So she was, when I see her, she's what, 12? So she's now 16, maybe 17. My dream is that she reads the book in English or in Spanish. It's why I wrote the young readers version, was to get it into the hands of these children who I witnessed were being trafficked out of the El Paso airport, or McAllen, I think, at that time. So there are some young people, some of us, who will be able to survive through that horror and become incredible human beings and, you know, very productive in our country. Others will never recuperate from that. Never recuperate from that. And for me, Bill, what ends up happening in the writing of the book, right, is that when my mom realizes that I was almost separated from her, I was almost taken by immigration agents when we arrived.
But she stood her ground.
But she stood her ground, my 5-foot tall mom with a really big voice, who put fear into the immigration official by screaming at him. When she realizes that this could have been her, and she tells me this could have been you, it was in that moment, Bill, when I was like, oh, now I know why I'm the journalist that I am. It was like the trauma of that moment of almost being separated was so imprinted in my body. And as you know, I've been highly criticized because I'm just too immigrant-y. Could you just stop being so immigrant-y? But that's how the trauma reflected in me. Because of my privilege, I was able to use it for this other thing. But we worry about so many people who are living in trauma in our city, right? And we can see them right here. You know, I'm sure that if we just look, there are recent arrivals, some who are going to be able to make it, and others who are going to be severely traumatized forever because what our city and mayor, oh my God, wait a second, is he indicted? Oh, okay. And the mayor have done to them.
We have our mayor in San Francisco. Her friends around her are being indicted. So far, she hasn't been.
Not a good look. So no questions, really? Y'all are just like loving to listen to it.
Raise your hand.
Yeah, we love it to have community involvement.
I have one question.
Yes.
So you were mentioning about the fact that Trump brought this discourse on migration on another level, but I guess he didn't create this anti-migration sentiment in the United States. So you mentioned 9/11, but so he rode a wave that was already there in 2016.
Yes.
I'm thinking, could you mention other turning moments that brought us to where we are now?
I will, and I wonder whether or not Bill and I. So, the last progressive, if we agree, the last progressive president on immigration was actually George H.W. Bush, who increased the refugee numbers by the highest that they have ever been. Prior to that, you had Ronald Reagan, right, who did the massive Immigration Reform and Control Act, which actually transformed the population of immigration in terms of giving a pathway to citizenship and brought up the country in terms of bringing the country out of a recession because of this. Bill Clinton, who was at the launch of Latino USA, he came to our 1993 launch and was like, oh my God, I love Latinos. But Bill Clinton also ran on an anti, to use his words, illegal immigrant platform. Bill Clinton was the first to start building the wall, as it were. So you're right. It was built on what should have really changed with Ronald Reagan and changed the entire dynamic, but then unfortunately both Republicans and Democrats have run by bashing immigrants as problematic for our country.
Yeah, I'll give props to Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, and also dump on Bill Clinton from with slightly not different but additional information. So IRCA, which Reagan signed in 1986, about 3 million individuals were able to get legalized under that bill. But it wasn't very generous because you had to have lived in the country for 5 years, and or been a special agricultural worker for 90 days within a certain 12-month period, and not everyone was able to come up with the documents, and a lot of people were afraid. And the fact that you had to live here for 5 years, automatically that meant there were a whole bunch of people that came in within the last 5 years that were not going to be eligible. So it was good, and I have on good authority that the reason why Ronald Reagan signed that bill was because his Council of Economic Advisors advised him that the country benefited so much from undocumented immigrants in terms of their tax dollars that they deserved it. And so he said, fine, do that. Incidentally, a footnote, the other group that the Council of Economic Advisors advised Reagan to take it easy on were gays and lesbians, because they also contributed more in tax dollars than others because they mostly at that time didn't have children. Okay? Anyway, and then the thing about George H.W. Bush, he comes in as this Central American civil wars are kind of winding down, and in addition to increasing visas, especially for business, to be honest with you, he helped push through something called TPS, temporary protected status. When we were representing asylum applicants from Guatemala and El Salvador, especially in the 1980s, we had a difficult time fitting those applicants into the new Refugee Act. It was new, it passed in 1980, and they didn't quite fit for people who are caught in the middle of conflict, which the vast majority of people who fled Guatemala and El Salvador at that time, they were caught in the middle. And so Congress came up with a good idea, and it was Barney Frank, actually, who came up with this idea of temporary protected status, and for people that were caught in the middle. And so there's a long history that has followed that of people who benefited from TPS, temporary protected status. Clinton, and I have so many gripes with Clinton, and I'm going to drop a name of a person that does not deserve as much credit as she continues to, in Faith Williams, those who I'm talking about. And it's Doris Meisner, who she gets a lot of credit still today. She's at the MPI in DC as a policy. She ran the old immigration service for many years. She and another guy who deserves some criticism, who became the dean of Georgetown Law School, Alex Volenikoff, they came up with supporting Operation Gatekeeper, which basically was cutting off the parts of the southern border that were the easiest to traverse, and pushing migrants to the most dangerous parts of the border. On average, one person dies a day, continuing since then, because they're pushed to the most dangerous terrain to pass in the heat of the summer in the Arizona desert, or in the mountains in the winter. And that's on Doris Meissner and Alex Volenikoff and Bill Clinton, that Operation Gatekeeper has continued today.
But
Mary?
what was their motivation? Like,
They-
I
they-
remember this because I'm an immigrant from Canada. I'm like the best immigrant you can want, right?
They really thought,
when Clinton was there, I remember 187 because I realized that I, as a green card holder,
right,
if I became disabled in the United States, where I was making my career as a Stanford, I would not be entitled to disability benefits. I would have to go
Yeah.
back to Canada and be separated from my family. Like, that's what Clinton wanted. What the hell was he
they
thinking?
really believed in, the phrase they used was control through deterrence. They felt that they could deter people, but as Maria just, there was a mayor of Douglas, Arizona, along the border who had the greatest quote. He said, "You can mine this border. You can put, people will still come when they're desperate." And they were wrong. They could not control through deterrence. People continued coming, and
But
people.
why did they
continued.
want to deter? What was Clinton
Oh,
thinking?
they
that-
bought. By then, they had bought.
What was the problem he was trying to solve?
Oh, they bought into the immigrants are taking jobs away from us. Immigrants are criminal. Even back then.
Back then.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
So what ends up happening, you have to imagine, is that the majority, overwhelming majority of the mainstream media, right, is run by rich white men, many of them from the East Coast and Ivy League, who present heterosexual, and I say that, yeah, right. And these men who are like my colleagues, right, they were raised consuming the same kind of media that has been telling the story of, oh my God, they're overrunning the border. Oh my God, there's such a problem. It's like, you've been saying, this has been the reportage for 50 years. Has the United States completely imploded because of immigrant labor and crime? No, not at all. But they, as journalists, as senior editors who are making decisions on how these stories are covered, continue to repeat the same old because they don't do what Bill and I do, right? Which is, we go to the border, we see what's happening, we do that reporting. Instead, they just repeat what they think, what they were actually hearing from other journalists historically. Because you don't really have a moment in American history that is overwhelming, that changes the entire tone, that says, wow, immigrants are amazing. Wow, they're so cool. They're like Canada. Canada's not perfect, but you know, there's a very different vibe in Canada regarding immigrants. It's kind of like, hey, what's up, man? Now, I make a joke. If I was in charge of all of the mainstream media over the last 40 years, right? What I would have wanted to see in the headlines are headlines like this. For example, just bear with me. New York Times headline, 10,000 Bangladeshis set to arrive any day now. New York is thrilled beyond belief because Bangladeshi cooking is going to transform the food in New York City, and we can't wait. Oh my God, it's going to be great when the Bangladeshis arrive. Headline of the Omaha Post-Register. 50,000 people from Cambodia are coming. Whether they're immigrants or refugees, but they're coming. And when the 50,000 come from Cambodia, Omaha, Nebraska is then going to be on the map for having the best dance scene in the entire country, because they do the best dances of all time, the people from Cambodia. Chicago prepares for the arrival of 25,000 folks from Guatemala, and it's going to be amazing because Guatemalans are going to change our fashion industry. They're going to bring their style, and Chicago's going to be the now style maker, not New York, because of the Guatemalans who are coming. And then I would have put headlines like, oh my God, so many immigrants are coming. It's going to be such a blast. Imagine all the people that you can fall in love with and have sex with. I'm being facetious, but imagine if that had been the tenor of the headlines in our country. Imagine. Yes.
And they are. I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
But Maria names names of these guys that were in control that did their best to quiet you
Oh, yeah.
and to not promote you and to not give you the jobs that you deserve.
Yeah, it's okay, it don't matter because they all know I want a Pulitzer now, so I'm just like, what?
Sorry. But that's in her book.
And I'm just being really serious.
The,
I'm like,
the
what?
names are in her book.
Yeah,
So.
I'm like, what? Come at me.
Right.
Come. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say there was a point when you were giving that little example where you said refugees or immigrants or something, like putting these words next to each other. Do you notice a difference in rhetoric around refugee, immigrant, or like illegals or aliens, quote unquote?
No, I mean, I think at this point it's like this flattening, which is anybody, you know, and that's why it gets really problematic when you have Latinos, because I was just in South Florida speaking to Latinos who are literally, oh my God, they must build the wall. They have to build the wall. The wall must be bigger. They have to keep all these people out, all these criminals. And I'm like, what are you talking? Are you serious? And they are. Cue the sound. So it's a total flattening. It would be beautiful. It would be beautiful if we were at a point where we could be like, oh my God, the difference between immigrants and refugees, and it's like, but no. I mean, I think, Bill, it's
no,
just
I agree with you, but I will drop a foot. I agree with you, and part of it was manifested in when Trump won the first time, his anti-Syrian refugee rhetoric. It caught on. The one exception is what we've seen in the last 2 years, actually, when we withdrew from Afghanistan versus the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. We've actually been much more open-armed to the Ukrainians than we have been to the Afghanistan refugees.
Any other questions?
Well, the idea of a pathway to citizenship, what happened to that? Like it evaporated, it disappeared, right? And it was at the time, I mean, I remember when it opened, I remember being in the Bay Area at that moment, and just Nicaraguenses and people just stampeded. It was the most wonderful moment. There was so much elation and so many people who've been working for years and years and years and were able to get legalized. And it was euphoric, and I'm like, what happened to the concept of pathway to citizenship?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you have and I'm sure you know this, that your brother Raul actually did a great job of documenting the contributions that migrants who got legalized gave to the country. But anyway, the rhetoric took over, and millions and millions and millions of dollars have been spent on getting legalization passed again. The Ford Foundation itself has put in over $20 million to our friends in DC to get comprehensive immigration reform passed in the last 2 years. But the rhetoric, the anti-immigrant rhetoric has prevented that, even to the point where there was a debate between Dreamers and the comprehensive immigration reform people. The Dreamers were treating the comprehensive immigration reform folks, a lot of my friends in DC, okay, were treating Dreamers like kids and telling them, you'll have your time, stop pushing the DREAM Act, which is for kids who grew up here. Stop pushing because it'll get in the way. Even Luis Gutierrez from Chicago, there's an infamous YouTube of him saying that to Dreamers. Behave yourselves. Let them grown-ups pass comprehensive immigration reform, and it all blew up in 2010 when even the DREAM Act didn't pass. Yeah.
So Bill and I actually haven't spoken about this a lot, but and Luis Gutierrez is a complicated person, but okay, we're gonna set that aside. But I do remember when people began to talk about having piecemeal immigration reform, and I was like, it's a disaster, in my view. Once you start doing the piecemeal, and I completely support and understand the radical perspective of our young dreamers, they changed everything, right? Their democratic participation as non-voters, but mobilizing nonetheless, changed. But if you ask me, I fall on the side of, and I know this is hard, but I would have said there's nothing but comprehensive immigration reform. I would have been on that side. It's not my role, right? I'm a journalist. It's not, but now where are we? DACA is teetering.
Yeah.
We really don't know what's going to happen. I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Like, they're really going to try to take away DACA? Like, really, this is possible? And it is possible with the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court has already hinted they're going to strike down DACA.
I was going to say, on that note, I look forward to reading the book and your explanation of this transformation that's needed. It doesn't seem that incrementalism is the answer, for all the reasons we just talked about and more. But is there a groundswell of people or organizations who are on board with this idea of a complete transformation? I don't think it's going to happen in government. There are politicians who need to keep their jobs. They can't be. They would say radical. I don't think it's radical, but it would be called radical. Is there a groundswell? Are there organizations that are seriously thinking and planning and coalescing on this?
So the original title of my book, instead of Humanizing Immigration, which I actually came to like, was Abolish ICE. Okay, and Beacon rejected that title because there's already a small book with the same title, and my answer is this: that in my lifetime, I admit probably not, but there are many people that believe that we've got to just rebuild this whole system from a non-racist perspective, and I choose to believe that sentiment still is cyclical when it comes to immigration and attitudes towards immigrants. I want to believe that, and that we'll come full cycle again at some point.
We have 2 minutes left. Oh, okay, you have a question.
Oh, I was wondering if you could address the idea of how genderized some of the insulting language and the language of fear and of, there's the violent side of it, but there's also the idea of that so many immigrants are shifted into some category that people are supposed to view them as a certain way, certain weaker because they can't, do this or they can't do that or they can't, that sort of almost that feminizing, which plays into our misogynistic culture too.
So, and then I think we're gonna have to wrap because
okay, sorry.
But I really appreciate this question because we're in New York, right? And our city is a welcoming city. No matter what this mayor has done, it is also a sanctuary city, and it is a city that is apart from human beings who were trafficked in slavery here, right? Immigrants have built this city. So I don't remember when it was, 6 months ago, 4 months ago, 5. I went to the Roosevelt Hotel, which, as you know, is now being called the new Ellis Island. It's where immigrants and refugees are being housed. And it was kind of at the height of one of these moments, right? And I was there at 7:30 in the morning, just talking to people, hanging out. It was actually 2 women, one from Colombia, one from Ecuador. And I asked them, I was like, there's an image, right, that even New Yorkers have that you are victims. That you are victims of something,
right,
or multiple things. And I said, do you see yourselves as victims, or do you see yourselves as women, who get shit done?
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, we're definitely not victims. Oh, we are definitely not victims. We get things done. Which I think is really important because it really does change the narrative and the feminization of victimhood, etc. It's like, these are women who have so much self-love and love of their families that they're prepared to risk their entire lives for that. Yeah. So to me, the headline that I would have put if I ran the newspapers and all the media is I would have told the story of one of those women who said to me, because I'm fascinated by these folks because, coño man, they are survivors. Yeah. Oh my God, I want that. I believe we have it, but wow. And so I said, so how did you do it? You know, like get from there to there. And she's telling me the story, and she's like, and so then these church people paid for my tickets to get to LaGuardia, and then I'm here in LaGuardia, and I arrive, and I got my kid, and I'm at LaGuardia, and she's like, and I'm kind of looking around, like, what's my next move? You know, she said, I wasn't asking anyone for any money, but remember, immigrants and refugees were in the news, and she said, and people saw me, and they were coming up to me and giving me money. I was like, excuse me? She was like, yeah, they were coming up to me. They were like, you know what? Here's $20. Here's $40. Here's $100. The face that you have is the one that I had. I was like, because that should have been the headline of the New York Times.
Yeah.
New Yorkers giving away free money at LaGuardia to newly arrived immigrants and refugees because they're welcoming them. Wow. Imagine. And so I think about them, right? Some of Bill and I stay in touch with some, but not all, right? And I just wonder, where are you? What's going to happen? But they do not see themselves as victims. And the hell that they're being put through, you know, being forced to sleep outside, standing outside the 26 Federal Plaza. We can go right now.
Right.
And just walk a few blocks and you will see people standing in line, starting now, to be in line all night, so that they can get in at 8 o'clock in the morning. Is there one porta potty? One. You're there, you know, with your kid all night, and you've got to figure out where to go pee. And still, they're like, we got this. Doing this. Man, that's what's not to love. Bill, thank you so much.
Maria, gracias.
No, thank you. Thank you for everybody. I'm going to take a little social media. So.
She's on social media, I'm not.
Yeah, Bill is like, what? And I'm like, okay, we're going to do a little Insta. So you guys, when I tell you, can you just, because you're so adorable. And I want to show that people are coming out and doing this kind of stuff, because you could all be asleep. Okay, it's 7:30, a little early, but you could all be like,
I
you
understand
know.
from my college students that Thursday night is the night now.
Thursday night is the night. So, hello, start waving, everybody. Okay, wave. There you go. Oh my God. Oh, sweet. Hi, Bill. Love it.
I like the way that the women were almost paraphrasing Lin-Manuel in Hamilton.
Yes,
The
of
line
course.
from Hamilton.
And of course, they
Get
were like,
stuff
we came
done,
here to
yeah.
see Lin-Manuel. I was like, "Shit." They didn't say that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That was the Maria has a cameo.
Does she?
Yeah.
It's not a cameo because I don't play myself.
Oh,
Cameo's
that's true.
only when you play yourself.
Oh, you're right.
so-
Okay, well, she's featured in the Heights.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, as leading a protest, right? Or speaking at a protest.
Yeah, usually when you see me on camera, I have a lot of television makeup. But for this shoot, they were like, no makeup. I was like, what? And they were like, you're just going on with
Come
the
on, somebody who
makeup.
hangs out with Lin-Manuel.
I mean, I don't
Can't get any
exactly hang
better.
out, but I have known him since he was not famous. So.
Thanks, everyone.
Bill, Maria, thank you so much. I know I'm not alone when I say that I could listen to you two talk, and Maria in particular. You're brilliant all evening long, and lucky for all of us, Futuro Media's work is widely available, and you should all definitely check their work out. Again, we've got books for sale downstairs, and Bill and Maria will be downstairs, so you can, this is not the end, and we've got snacks downstairs for everyone. So thank you all so very much for coming. Thank you.